Mr. Garcia, would you like to please open up for us?
Sure. We'll start the Legislative Black Caucus combined or joint hearing. And the topic of discussion today will be the state of black enterprises in California. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to just have the chairwoman also say a few words here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us at this important hearing. I'd like to thank my colleagues, Assemblymember Susan Bonilla, Eduardo Garcia, for their respective committees, for partnering with the Legislative Black Caucus to examine the state of black enterprise in California. Businesses are critical in our economy because they create jobs and opportunities for Californians. They generate tax revenue for our schools, public safety, social safety net. They provide goods and services that help our society function. Entrepreneurship and black enterprise are a part of our history in this country and have remained important pillars of the black community for generations. We are all aware of the time in our history when the black enterprises were the only means of survival for our community because they were the only ways we could create wealth for ourselves and jobs for our neighbors. As times have changed and racial discrimination has become less legal and less acceptable, barriers and challenges unique to black enterprise still hamper the ability of entrepreneurs to start a business, grow a business, and keep a business open. As a business owner since 1980, I have experienced challenges as well as reveled in the triumphs of my business. This joint hearing is one way for us to check it out. I learned very easy and very early how to write a check on both sides. And we're here today to hear about challenges. We're here to talk about triumphs of business owners who will testify. It's imperative that the economic future of California take a pulse of business and pay special attention to black enterprises and the business of people of color in order to ascertain their needs. So we need to do what we can do as a state to improve the odds for their success. There is inherent risk in going out on your own, building a career from scratch, being reliant on your own creativity, intelligence, skills, resourcefulness to make ends meet so that the payroll is met. I applaud all our panelists for taking that risk, for being here today, and I look forward to hearing from all of you. And thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you, Assemblymember Brown. And thank you, Assemblymember Brown. I, too, would like to welcome everyone once again to this hearing. I'd like to begin by thanking Assemblymember Reginald Jones Sawyer for chairing the Legislative Black Caucus, Assemblymember Brown for bringing the idea of having this hearing, this combined hearing together, and so thank you again. And also recognize that we do have a couple members of the JETI Committee, Assemblymember Brown, Mr. Gibson, as well as Mr. Kansan Chu. California's economy, as I've referred to a couple times, they tell of two Californias. Coming out of the recession, California has experienced significant economic growth, ranking 5th in the U.S. overall economy. Among global economies, the state's GDP now ranks 8th. And as great as the economic picture appears, it is important to recognize that California's prosperity is not equitably dispersed. Many areas in Central and Southern California, such as the areas that I represent, and I know many of the areas that many of you who are here members represent, have not fully recovered. While people in San Mateo and Marin County are experiencing unemployment rates at around 3%, I can shed light to unemployment in my district being close to 21%. There is a similar double standard for California's historically underserved communities of color. In May, 13.4% of blacks in the workforce were unemployed, as compared to only 6.6% amongst whites. While there are many examples of successful African Americans and Latinos, the fact remains that one of the most significant indicators of what economic opportunities you will have is your race, your ethnicity, and your zip code, the place in which where you live. To better understand in addressing these disparities, we hope that in this hearing we'll be able to highlight some of the common threads that we can look at comprehensively and ultimately propose public policy that will improve the lives of all Californians. This information from the hearing will help us bridge this dual economic reality and put forth a prosperity agenda that includes all Californians. In closing, let me again thank Ms. Assemblymember Cheryl Brown for inviting the JETI Committee to participate in today's hearing. And in advance, I'd like to apologize that I will be stepping out around 3:25. I will be chairing a committee right next door at 3:30. So thank you for allowing me to participate, and it's a great pleasure to be here and work with you all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garcia. It has been a pleasure working with you this year on JETI, and you are definitely one of those people who's concerned about businesses and about our economic well-being here in California. We have with us Jim Wood, Business and Professionals. Is that what, okay? The two committees, and you see a seat that's empty here, and it's because Ms. Bonilla will be joining us momentarily, and when she joins us, I have to go and present a bill, so I'll have to leave out and then come back. But Mr. Jim Wood is one of the people on the Business and Professions. Brian Jones, Business and Profession. Ling Ling Chang. Autumn Burke. Oh, I forgot. Nora Campos. I get the two of them confused, right? Nora Campos is here with us, and she's also with BNP. The caucus members are Autumn Burke and Mr. Gibson and myself at this time, but we will be joined by other members of the caucus as this hearing rolls on. But we want to be mindful of the time, and those of you who are going to be speaking as you come up, we have a timekeeper who will tell you when you have 2 minutes left, and that way we'll have enough time at the end of the hearing so that people can ask questions and we can have a discussion. So I would, I'd like to invite anyone from the panel anyone from our group to legislators. Anybody want to say anything? Okay, go ahead.
Obviously, as a Black Caucus member, I do want to thank Assemblywoman Brown and Assemblyman Garcia, as well as Assemblywoman Susan Bonilla, for putting this together today. I'm looking forward to the agenda. I looked at the agenda, and I'm looking forward to it, but I am hoping that this is a starting point. I really want to know from you what gains we've made, what more you really need from us. Obviously, it's really, really important that we give you the tools to be as successful as possible, and that's really why I'm here today. I really want to hear from you on what you need and what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. So really, that's all. I just want to thank you. I think all of us have to step in and out, but this is really important, and this is a great opportunity for us. So thank you for being here, all of you that have traveled to be here.
Thank you very much. Okay. I would like to take this time to invite our first two panelists who will share with us their own experience, personal stories as Black business owners whose businesses have been around for a very long time. Their bios are in the handout. Mr. James and Mr. Lee, you both have 10 minutes. Will you please join us at the table? If you would, you can find their bios in the handout. And I didn't mention that Reginald Jones Sawyer, our chair of the Black Caucus, is presenting in another in another hearing. He will be joining us as we move forward in this discussion. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I've known you both, and it's really good to see you in front of me and to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair, a member, and members of the committee. My name is Bonnie James, and I am President CEO of BRJ and Associates. BRJ and Associates is a construction management firm. By construction management, we mean it's used pejoratively and meant to cover 3 areas, essentially. When you hear the term, they're referencing program management, project management, and construction management. So I'll be using construction management throughout my presentation. What I wanted to focus on today, and 2 things. One is the small business aspect of what it is we do. BRJ is a small minority-owned, African-American-owned business. We have 22, 23 employees. When I get back, I should have another one, employees. And we face issues every day, particularly in the area of construction management. And what I want to do is to differentiate between construction, because oftentimes people confuse the general contractors with the representative, that is the owner's rep in the process. That's the construction management piece, program, project, construction management. So we're the betweeners between the owner of the project and the general contractor. We are hired to look after your interest on an ongoing basis. Issues for the small firms that are in this business is primarily in the area of a group of firms that I consider to be in this twilight zone. And what I mean by that is that they are too big to be small and too small to be big. And what happens in a situation like that is that once they finish the programs where there are benefits, let me use an example, the 8A program, which is a federal program, the DBE program, which is a federal program. Once graduated from those 2 programs and you're placed in the pond with the big fish, you must compete with the major firms, and there obviously are multi-billion-dollar firms. And so with this group, this particular group of firms, there is no safety net. And whereas other firms, smaller firms, they have somewhat of a safety net. And I mention this only because I believe that that's an untapped resource, particularly for lots of employment. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the larger firms, generally speaking, they have a bench of employees that they can call upon, and if they need to, from New York, from anywhere in the world, because they are world over, and they simply will transport them in to manage the firms, manage the project. But that is not, when they do that, it's not adding to the employment. It's simply taking one employee that works for the firm already and move them around to another location. Where employment occurs, and I know that you know this, is in small firms who must, in order to, if they do grow, they must hire. And then there's this group that I'm referencing that's too small to be big, too big to be small, are firms that I believe is untapped. So that's one major hurdle to try to solve. Now, I think there are ways of solving that problem, much along the same lines of the goals that are set for DBEs, goals that are set for 8A. There should be it could be goals for these firms that I'm referencing. Small firms, but they don't qualify for the other two categories. The other area of concern is diversification. In order to survive in this business, you have to work in more than one sector. Example, BRJ began its career in construction management in the area of schools, colleges, universities. So we specialize in that area, much of that because of my background, because of my partner's background. But survivability means that you must take those skill sets into other sectors, example, transportation, and trying to diversify in that way and take the skill set to transportation as an example, is making that transition is extremely difficult as well. And what happens in a situation like that, and most times, the only way you can do that is to team. And you try to team with larger firms. Larger firms are mostly interested in teaming with 8A firms or DBE firms. And so once again, this group that I'm referencing of small firms who graduated from these two programs are simply left out of being able to transition or diversify. What makes it very difficult, it's not impossible, but it's very difficult because the larger firms prefer doing business with a team that they consider to add value. What they mean by that, adding value, is the fact that it helps them get the project. That's adding value from their perspective. The other area that we experience difficulty is with staff of public agencies. Incidentally, much of what I'm talking about is geared to public agencies. Even though we do commercial and private projects, the bulk of our work is in the area of local entities, school districts, cities, counties, special districts, and state program, federal program as well. And so with regard to the staffing in this situation, the staff will, many times there's a disconnect between the staff who recruit, select, and hire. It's different from the outreach programs that you put together, a unit that's geared to and geared toward recruiting small businesses. But when staff is involved, oftentimes they ignore the efforts of the outreach program and simply hire whomever they wish, oftentimes, unless there's a real restriction against that approach. But we oftentimes run into that problem where hiring by staff is different from that than the policy oftentimes that you set or the local agency set. So those are programs, those are issues or barriers which we experience. The third thing, the fourth barrier that I would mention is elected and or appointed members of governing bodies, such as the positions that you hold. Oftentimes we run into problems where those positions, your positions, elected positions, appointed positions, are not reflective of the population they serve. And I'll hasten to point out that an example of this, that the Board of Directors of the California High-Speed Rail Authority is a case in point. And let me be very direct and say there's not an African-American member on that board, and it never has been on that board. And yet that's one of the major projects in the state of California. And I believe that there's one vacancy currently, as my analysis tells me. And this situation can, in my opinion, and should be corrected. I'm sure you know that the governor has 5 appointees. The Senate Rule Committee has 2 appointees, and the Speaker has 2 appointees. And as my analysis says to me,
Well, no, and just to give it just really quick. They are looking at
Okay.
I just had this conversation 2 days ago.
okay, all right.
I had this conversation 2 days ago. They are looking at we had this conversation, and they are looking at appointing a minority to the.
A minority or a black person?
The one position that's remaining, I believe, is a Senate Rule Committee.
It is in fact a Senate. It is in fact a Senate appointment, and I have recently had that conversation, and my understanding is, in fact, that issue is being looked at.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate my time is up. I appreciate very much you listening to me. I appreciate the opportunity as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that powerful statement. I'd like to turn
Madam Chair?
to yes.
If I may?
Yes.
I just want to ask the speaker one question. Is it your position that there has never been an African American on this board from a high-speed rail,
Yes,
currently or in the past?
that's my recollection.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our chair has joined us, and I wanted to know from him, would you like to make your opening statement now or let Mr. Larry Lee finish, and we can finish with this panel?
I'll let Mr. Lee finish. I know he's been waiting patiently.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, would you please give us your 10-minute?
Sure. Thank you all for allowing me to come. My name is Larry Lee. I'm president and general manager of the Sacramento Observer newspaper. The Observer has been publishing here in California for nearly 53 years. We actually currently have a beautiful exhibit on display at the California State Fair, so we're being saluted by the State Fair, honoring the Observer's history. Our founder, Dr. William H. Lee, my father, has published and has been the publisher of our newspaper for over 50 years, longer than anyone else in this state's history. So we're very proud of our commitment to the state of California. We want to see California be the best state that it can be, and have over our years, our leadership has provided an opportunity to let those that have often gone unspoken or underserved to have a voice, not only through the pages of our paper, but also through different efforts. Like my father served as the chair of the Dr. Martin Luther King State Holiday Committee under George Duke Mason. I've served on other gubernatorial areas such as the Complete Count effort as well too. So we want to make sure that California can be the best that it can be. And this is a wonderfully diverse state, and we feel like the opportunities should extend to all of California. And we really encourage and urge our leaders to help make that happen. Efforts like this are a step toward that. So we thank you very much for your leadership and your efforts in pulling this together. I won't be terribly long, and I'll speak kind of broad. Obviously, as a newspaper, our role is kind of twofold. Obviously, we are a business and have been so in the state for over half a century, but we also are a reporter and observer of activities that go on throughout the state. So we wear many hats. I also currently serve as chair of the Sacramento Black Chamber of Commerce as well too. So this issue is of grave concern, not only to me personally, but also to our community. And I can feel like I can confidently say that many of California's black business owners feel like, truthfully, that the state has turned its back on them. for a state, as I mentioned, that is as diverse and wonderful as California is, unfortunately, that's a great tragedy. The failings of the state to stand up for and support its African American businesses has had a ripple effect in our community. Our community at large. As we know, small businesses are the economic engine of the state's economy, and particularly micro businesses, those that employ people between 0 and 4 employees, really tend to be, the economic engine for our state. And so when they suffer, our state suffers, and then our community suffers even greater. It's one of the main reasons why, unfortunately, for instance, as you look at statistics like the African American wealth, the African American wealth is about $7,000 compared to white wealth is about $120,000. That in itself is a travesty, and addressing the plight and the challenges of black businesses will begin to address those issues. Obviously, we've reported on and witnessed the challenges facing black businesses in California for, as I said, over half a century. And we've also watched the successes of a number of black businesses. We, in 1989, published a publication called The State of Black Business in California. This was Prop 209, and when I tell you that we published a publication that was at the time the largest publication ever published by a black newspaper, almost 360 pages, full of page after page of success stories of African American businesses in California. It was a tremendous testament to the successes that the state has had. And then if I try to tell you that the challenges of trying to do that in this post-Prop 209 era, we're trying to salute. In that publication, we saluted over 100 African American businesses. That if we were to try and do that today, it would be a grave, sad testimony to where we are as a status of black businesses in California. And there are a couple observations specifically I'd like to share. As a newspaper, we have had successes and struggles with dealing with the state over the years. When state agencies or programs have a shared mission of addressing the needs of African Americans, and I say very clearly African Americans in the state, we've had some successes. We share a mission. There is a direct impact on trying to reach targeted populations in our community. Not only do state agencies do a good job of reaching out to us editorially, trying to find out, make sure that we share messages with our community, but they also do a good job with advertising, which is the lifeline for black newspapers. So when I speak here today, I'm speaking about advertising, outreach, and marketing efforts. There have been some instances, however, when the state has done a poor job of including the black press in those sorts of outreach, marketing, and advertising efforts. Some of those areas, and there are many, unfortunately, but some of the ones that I'll mention here now are areas, for instance, like the Affordable Care Act rollout with Covered California. There was probably about a 16-month struggle that we had to fight in order to try and get a portion of the tens of millions of dollars that was being used to reach out to those that are underinsured. And as we know, statistically, African Americans are high on that number, and it was very challenging trying to get any leeway, get the needle to move in any way, shape, or form in utilizing African American press or media outlets throughout the state of California. Another area of concern currently, which is very important to not only to our community, but I think to the state at large, is the recruitment of law enforcement officers, CHP. The lack of utilizing ethnic media to reach out to those that might see law enforcement and CHP be a career opportunity, and for those agencies to reflect the diversity of the state is critical. We cannot afford to have our law enforcement agencies not look like the communities they serve. And if we can have some sort of headway in trying to make sure that that happens, that would be very helpful. I know it is, like I said, it's a shared mission for the Black press, and we want to make sure that that's something that moving forward is something that doesn't become as challenging as others have been. There was also we would also like to see the state intervene and assist effectively with federal programs, such as there was one that came out a couple years ago, the Distracted Drivers Program, where we talked about text messaging and the like to drivers. And unfortunately, the Black press was not included in those outreach efforts at all. And we wrote letters to the Department of Transportation and others to try and see how we could address those needs. And Sacramento was actually one of the targeted markets for this effort, and we at the Observer had no success in trying to get any sort of advertising outreach marketing. So those are some areas that definitely need some addressing. Last, I'd like to make sure I mention is we could also use the state's assistance in trying to make sure that there is either policy or some sort of efforts in utilizing our ethnic chambers to collect data. There is a grave need to find out and to examine, the actual real plight of Black businesses. And we know at the state level, many of you are not able to address those issues in that manner. But our ethnic chambers, whether they're state, regional, or local, are able to do so and be more targeted with trying to make sure they can provide capacity building opportunities and allow our businesses to grow and flourish. Again, Black businesses in California is a critical part of our African American communities in general. And we know that our businesses have a tendency to hire the hard to hire. And so as we look at unemployment figures, as was mentioned earlier, our businesses have a tendency to hire our community and help them grow and become great professionals moving forward. So my time is up. So I'd like to thank you all for this effort and continue to urge you to keep the faith.